All right, so we left this at Halley's life table, and here it is in the red line. And what I've done is I've superimposed the US life table for 1979, 1981, and there it is. And we can see a few differences of what's happened. The biggest, of course, is this, what happens in the early years of life. What used to happen 300 years ago was much, much, much worse than what happens nowadays. But the other thing is now we sort of coast along until what, age 50 or so. Here's age 50, and then we start dying at a higher rate, whereas in Breslau's time, it was like a constant rate. So here there is this sort of linear constant rate, but it only starts in the late 60s. So lots of little interpretations like this that we can make about the life table. Now, of course, this is all premised on the same quality of data 300 years ago. So that's questionable, but still, we can make these qualitative assessments. Here is what Fryer thinks that the life table at the time of the Roman Empire looks like. And this is based on looking at tombs and things and seeing how old people were when they died, and very imaginative reconstruction of some data. It's, of course, the quality, once again, is, of course, very, very questionable. But we see a bigger, much bigger precipice here in the first 5-10 years of life, that we're almost down to 40%, so like 60% of, which you might think is extremely high, but wait a minute. So this is what a reconstruction of Roman Empire stuff. This one is my favorite. This is out of a report by Lemuel Shattuck. Now, Lemuel Shattuck did a survey. He was part of a committee that did a survey of Boston in the middle of the 19th century. And he was now, as a result of this, he wrote, apparently he was the chair of the committee, but he actually wrote most of the report anyway. He included only one graphic in all of it, and that's this one that I'm showing you here. What he was trying to do, he was trying to make a case for improving public health in Boston. The quality of air and of the abodes, the filth in the abodes and stuff, the hygiene and all this was so bad in Boston, and he was trying to make a case for this. And actually, he's known as the father of public health in this country because he outlined what a state department of public health should look like. And in fact, Massachusetts was the first state public health department, and based on his design. Unfortunately, it happened after he died, so he didn't get the credit that he should have gotten. But anyway, here is the graph from his report. What it is a graph of four separate life tables. What he wanted to do was present Boston. So what he did was he chose a city in England, roughly the same level, with roughly the same level of industrialization that Boston had. And this was the town of Preston. So he chose Preston, England, at roughly the same time, and showed their life experience. And that's the top curve here. So Preston is this top curve that comes down here. Now, be careful because here it crosses the next curve. So there's a crossover there. The next curve down is my hometown of Newton, and that's this curve here. And you see that Newton and Preston are very similar. And as I said, by age 70, they crossed over. And we see from those actually that by age 10, here's the age 10 for those two, there was like a 20% mortality. So 20% of the kids died by age 10. That's how you read those curves. Now, the surprising thing is that just below that, we get Boston. So here's the life experience in Boston. That's this curve here. And we see that in Boston, about 50% of all kids died by the age, 50% of all kids died by age 10. And this he was attributing to the pollution and the living conditions and sanitation, etc., available to inhabitants of Boston. And the point he was also trying to make was that the poorer people had it even worse. What the bottom curve is once again, it's still Boston. What this curve is still Boston. This was Boston Catholics. So this meant by, it was mostly Irish immigrants at that time. And take a look at this. This goes down to 30%. So by age 10, 70% of all kids died by age 10. So a very, very powerful picture of what's happening. And actually he did move the legislature into action, as I said, but a little bit later. So that was Lemuel Shattuck. Another example is having to do with smoking. Now here is what the dean at Harvard, Dean Briggs, had to say about smoking. And this was reported in 1920. And it's surprising because it says the peculiar evil in cigarettes. So already they said it's evil. Cigarettes are evil. I leave for scientific men to explain. I know merely that among college students, the excessive cigarette smokers are recognized even by other smokers as representing the feeblest form of intellectual and moral life. So this is quite damning, as I said, in 1920. So it's surprising that even in 1920, people seem to be suspicious of cigarettes. Now, what Ray Pearl did in 1938, he published this in 1938, is he did a study where he divided a cohort into three categories. The category he called non-users, then those who are moderate smokers, and those who are heavy smokers. And here's the life table. Now, the life table in this case starts at age 30. So he was interested in smoking, and so he didn't want to start at birth because the first 30 years of life is all very confused who dies, whether they're smokers or not. So he tried to make it clean by age 30. And here are the three survival curves. And so what we see is a much more precipitous drop for the heavy smokers than the moderate smokers even, but certainly than the non-smokers. And in fact, if we look at the median survival, we see that the heavy smokers have a median age of about, what is that, about 57 or so? And the non-smokers have a median age of about 67. So, roughly speaking, just by looking at medians, one loses 10 years of life because of smoking. Associated, I should say, associated with smoking. Okay. Now, there is one other very interesting thing that I'd like to point out with this, and that is that death, like taxes, is inevitable, has to happen to all of us. So what he drew here is that by age 100, everybody is dead. Okay. But look at what's happening here. If we look at, say age 70, there's only 30% of heavy smokers. So if we started with 100 heavy smokers, there's only 30 left by age 70. Whereas for the non-smokers, we're at about, 45%. Now, here's the interesting thing. By age 100, they're all going to die. So in the next 30 years, say, So in the next 30 years, these 30, say we start with 100, these 30 are going to die, and at the same amount of time, these 45 are going to die. So what is that going to say to us? It says to us that the mortality rate for the non-smokers is going to be much faster, it's going to be much higher than it is for the smokers, because in the same amount of time as 30 die of heavy smokers, 45 have to die of the non-smokers. This is what is called the healthy worker effect. This is an example of what was called the healthy worker effect. And here it is. Here are the actual numbers used by Pearl. So if you look by age 70, of the non-smokers, there are 45,919. Of the moderate smokers, there's 41,431. And of the heavy smokers, there's 30,393. So if we, and the mortality rates are roughly the same by age 70. It's 51.69 per thousand. Here's 52.84. Here's 52.72. Now, by age 75, the mortality rate for the non-smokers is 73, and for the heavy smokers is 72. For the non-smokers at age 80, it's 103. Here it's 100 for the heavy smokers. At age 85, it's 142, and here it's 139. And here it's 197, and here it's 193, and so on, 273. So don't, by any means, take this as advice that you shouldn't smoke until age 70 and then start smoking at age 70. But this is what is called the healthy worker effect. And this is the way Pearl explained it. Here, just as is usually the case in our experience in studies of this sort, the differences between the usage groups in specific mortality rates, as indicated by QS, practically disappear from about 70 on. And what he's saying is that if you're a heavy smoker and you survive to 70, he says that this group is such tough and resistant specimens that thereafter tobacco does them no further measurable harm as a group. But you'll see in your epidemiology studies that if the outcome impacts your membership in a group, then it makes subsequent conclusions suspect. Now, the other interesting thing is that his conclusion is that smoking is not very good for you. But what struck me when I first read this was that he published this in 1938. And he published it in a very reputable journal, Science. But somehow we ignored this message. It's all to the power of the tobacco industry that they were able to, with advertising, have such an impact on us.